Hello, welcome everyone to this week's episode of the Framework Podcast. I'm your host, as normal, Jamie Hopkins, and I'm joined by my co-host here today, Anna Limon, and excited to have on one of Anna's friends and introductions here for the show, which I love because it's even though Dana and I have exchanged a couple emails and accidentally showed up on the same podcast one other time together, really our first time to interact. So I'm going to be learning just as everyone else is here today. So Anna and Dana, welcome onto the show here today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Jamie.
So Dana, I'd love to ask you just, can you give us the 30 seconds of who you are, what you do? So obviously you're involved with Chip and you've got probably a broad experience, which we'll get to, but just what do you do today?
Sure. So today I feel like I wear too many hats. Is that a title? Too many hat wearer. So I am the CEO and founder of CHIP, which stands for Changing How Individuals Prosper. And what we do is we make it easier for consumers to find financial professionals of color, specifically Black and Latinx financial professionals.
That's awesome. And how did Anna? How did you two meet? I guess that's always a good question, right? So you two kind of came on the show here together, and Anna did the introduction. So I'd love to actually hear that story of how you interacted.
Yeah, so somebody once told me about Chip, and I was like, wow, this is the coolest idea ever. I have to get in touch. It was Emlyn, actually. I was interviewing Emlyn for the Next Generation Planner, and he told me about Chip. And I was like, this is awesome. You have to introduce me to Dana. So Dana and I connected for an article for the Next Generation Planner, and the rest is history. So I think what she's doing is so amazing. And it's funny because Dana has her own podcast. I don't know if you know that, Jamie, but if anybody's out there, the Included Series podcast is a really great one. But on a recent episode of the podcast, Dana, you talked about how like you have a lot of gifts and you manifest them all. And while people might think that it's unfocused, like you know exactly what you're doing. And I just loved that. You said we shouldn't apologize for our gifts. So anyway, I thought that was wonderful. And you can tell Jamie how we met and that story if you want.
Yeah, no, and I was sitting here thinking about, because you know how if you've known someone for a long time, you have to sit and think about when was the first moment?
Yeah.
And yes, it was through Emlyn. Yeah, so shout out to Emlyn. Definitely appreciate the connection. So yeah, that was our first meeting, and then we did the article and just kind of definitely have stayed in contact through our shared passion for uplifting and amplifying voices of color in this industry. So it's been great to continue to connecting.
That's awesome. I love the people who come on the show, and we've got these just different connections and how interwoven everything is, right? Emlyn, he's been on the show before too, and one of the things I learned about him that I didn't know before was that, he shifted his career due to something that Ron, our CEO, used to put out, and we still put out in our coaching program. He actually just randomly I guess they were left over in the bank when he was working there. We call it blueprinting. And he picked up a blueprint and he did it, and he ended up leaving that job and going and starting his stuff from doing that. And it's like, it's funny, right? Like you printed too many and somebody ends up changing their whole career because there were just extra pamphlets laying around. And I'm like, that's a really cool thing. And I didn't know he told us that when we were on the show, and I hadn't heard that before. And it's just so interesting, right? How small the world is when you start getting into pieces of it.
Oh yeah, you never know.
No. And so a couple things we always ask people when they come on the show. One of them is about food. So I like to start off with that as a general topic because I love food and therefore it's part of the show. That's it. But I also, going back to the last thing, food is this really amazing thing because everyone always answers a little bit different, right? Like everyone's preference on food, how they taste things, how they experience it is a little bit different. And it's so interwoven into cultures and communities. And that's really what I find very interesting about the responses. But, do you have a favorite food item, cuisine, aspect, something that pops into your head immediately?
Spaghetti.
I was ready.
Oh yeah. Well, first of all, I love food. I'm a big foodie. Spaghetti was actually my first table food, and I think that just stuck with me. And after going to Italy, you also get really spoiled because you really get that sense of that real taste of pasta and everything that it should taste like, and it tastes so different. And then you come back and you're just kind of like, well, this is not what I It's not real. But yeah, I love pasta. Just love the different textures. Love the taste of it, the sauces. And I would say I'm not big. I'm not a big sweet person, but I do have a fetish for chocolate chip cookies. That is probably my biggest weakness. And I would say that as much as I've taste tested cookies around kind of the fast food type of world, I will say that Panera Bread has one of the best chocolate chip cookies. I think I can stand on that.
Yeah.
If anyone is wondering, it's a big statement there.
I like that, right? Plant the flag right there, defend it, and stick with it. Do you know Chef Lauren Owens? She's in New Jersey also. Have you ever met?
I haven't met her, but I'm pretty certain I follow her on Instagram. And I have some friends that I believe have utilized her services. So that's interesting that you mentioned that.
Well, because Tyrone Ross, who's been on the show before too, and both of them are from Jersey, they're friends, and he swears by her chocolate chip cookies. I have not had them. We have hired her for an event before. She did a virtual event for our coach team, and we made like Napoleon cookies. It was like a strawberry, blueberry, chocolate one, and it was fun to make because you were like making 3 different batters and putting them together. It was pretty fun, but. She's in Jersey. We'll have to put her cookies up against the Panera ones and see how she does.
Well, hers already sound pretty good, and I'm sure because I've had other friends who have used her services, so I'm certain she's definitely in line or above. I'm sure she's above Panera.
Well, do you make your own pasta? Like, have you gotten into that or not really?
No, not really. I'm more of a show up and just put it on my plate type of person. I haven't really gotten into all of the pastas and really figuring out how to cook them myself from that angle, but definitely a lover of seeing them prepared and handed to me. One day I'll get to experience that, where I can actually go in and maybe try to create my own pasta and see how that tastes.
Yeah, there was the Netflix show with Aziz, the Master of None, and I think it's the second season. He spends like the first 2 or 3 episodes, he's like in Italy. He just like leaves New York and goes there and learns how to make pasta. And I feel like it's one of those things that like a lot of people probably just have that feeling like, I wish I could go do that. Right?
Oh yeah, well any excuse I think to be in Italy is fine. Whatever I'm over there doing, like if it's creating pasta, that definitely adds to the benefit of being there. But yeah, that's I remember that couple episodes. That was a great show.
Well, we'll shift over to the next one. And okay, Anna, do you have
Oh no, I was just gonna say that on Dana's podcast, she asked a question that we kind of have a similar spin on here at Framework. So you ask, when did you first fall in love with money? But here at Framework, we like to ask, what's your first money memory?
Oh yeah, I was trying to really think about this because I'm always the one asking that question to others. And me, I just have a bunch of pictures of myself when I was younger. You know how you had the fan and you would get cash as a kid and your birthday card and just like you're swinging it around. I would say those are probably my first memories of money outside of, my mother really talking to me about, the importance of, savings and all of those things. She did a really good job with that. But for me, it was just holding the cash and really seeing all the things that you can do with it, right? So when I was a kid, the big thing was going to Toys R Us, right? If everyone kind of remembers getting the Toys R Us mailers, magazines for anyone who was younger and of this generation and does not know about Toys R Us, and you were always looking for the big book when it came in through the mail. That was the biggest thing you wanted to celebrate, and going through that and trying to figure out all the things that I could get with my dollars. But I would say those are often my biggest memories is, looking for my birthday cards and seeing how much I had and what possibly might be saved and what else was going to Toys R Us. So they probably took a lot of my coins.
Oh yeah, Toys R Us took a lot of my coins too.
Oh yeah. I was a big Lego fan.
Okay. Would that be your first major purchase that you remember doing? And I mean major just in like emotional, right? Like where you got it and you're just... Do you remember buying a particular Lego set?
Not a particular one, I was really into building and creating and architecture, and I'm kind of surprised to some degree that I got into finance, and I'm sure we'll go down that path. But yeah, for me, I love to build things, so I would get any logo set and just sit down and just go to work. I mean, sometimes I would work off of what they wanted you to do, and sometimes I would just create my own thing, which is a lot of the times what you would do. You would just get the larger ones, and you would just start building castles and houses, and that was really fun for me. And there was another one that was out around that time. I think it was like Connects. If anyone remembers Connects, I'm going to be really impressed. But Connects was another one that I loved to build with as well. So that was my thing. Just, you want Dana to go somewhere and not bother you. Go give her a Lego set and some Connects. and she was good.
Love that.
Yeah, the Lego sets, my cousins, I know that we didn't really have many Legos in our house. I don't know why or why not, but my cousin always did, and they had like that big pirate ship. I remember being the thing that I was like really into, and they would build it all out. And I think my uncle probably was like the one forcing everyone to actually build in line with the instructions, right? So you actually ended up with a big pirate ship versus a double-decker couch, right? Which is the joke in the Lego movie.
Oh yeah. Well, there's always one person who like you have to do what is on the box, and sometimes it's cool, and sometimes it's like, well, what if the boat had had something else attached to it? What if they want to like put a diving board, or something really cool behind it?
So that's cool. You always like to build stuff. So that kind of like makes me think of like you as a founder and a business owner building Chip. So tell us how you came to Chip and the origin story there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it's funny when you think back of those memories as a kid and the things that you used to do and how they start to show up in your life later on as an adult. It's really interesting. So yeah, my ability to kind of always want to think outside the box and not always do the assignment, so to speak. But for me, when I was coming into this industry as a banker initially, and then moving into insurance and wealth management, I was always in a space, especially when I moved out of the banking world, of being the only person of color, a lot of times the only woman. And when I would see women, we were always in support roles, right? So it was my first introductory to that was moving outside of the bank and then working directly for regional sales manager, regional operations manager, who kind of created this hybrid role for me to help support them, but then also help manage a team of financial advisors. And all the women who were supporting these advisors, all the people that were supporting these advisors were women. And then I think there was one woman on the team of financial advisors that I was helping manage and track their sales and kind of make sure they were staying on task. And I was just like, where are more women, number one, and then where are people of color? Where are those that look like me? And I was constantly trying to really understand why there weren't more of us in this industry. And as I kind of maneuvered throughout my career, I just continued to kind of see that. I mean, it was getting a little bit better in certain areas. At that time, I was living in North Carolina. And of course, within the banking channel, there's a lot more diversity. But once you step out into private wealth, it just did not look like that. So for me, continuing down this path in my career, and then getting up to, I would say, 2019, 2020, and obviously with all of the social unrest that was really happening, it was like, well, how do I turn a lot of this energy, which was just frustration and just kind of years of that, and seeing the things that you're seeing in real time on the media, you just kind of want to channel that into something positive. And for me, well, what is my give back going to look like? What am I going to pour into this world where I know that I can have some sort of control over and start to kind of hopefully take flight and bringing more visibility to this industry for people of color. And that's really just how Chip was born. It was just born out of, feeling invisible myself, understanding that there were other people that also felt invisible, and not just professionals, but also consumers, kind of have that shared sense of invisibility in financial services. So, being able to bring Chip in the world was just amazing point for me. And then, continuing on its growth from here.
Can you tell us a little bit, like, how did you end up structuring Chip? And I imagine it's evolved from the very first time it came into your mind, too. Right? You probably had an
Oh yeah.
idea. It looks different than it probably was originally imagined. But I'd love to just hear, even about the evolution of that, how it's structured today, and then a little bit of where you might want it to go.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as a founder, when you're sitting down and you're trying to figure out, well, what is it you're building? You never really know until you get into the weeds of it and it starts to kind of form and it takes its own shape. So I knew that I wanted to bring more visibility to financial professionals. So I'm like, well, how do I do that? I'm not a tech person. I don't know where am I going to find someone who's going to help me create this? And then I actually ran into this low code, no code boot camp, which really empowered me to know that, hey, this is something I can actually just build and put together myself. I don't have to wait to find a technical co-founder or find a tech person or spend tons of money to kind of try to get this or test it out, right? Because I think that's where a lot of founders kind of not necessarily go wrong, but end up spending a lot of money. And coming out of the finance industry, and I like to call myself a frugal founder. So I don't like to spend unnecessarily. It was like, how can I do this in the most efficient manner, just to kind of test and see what we're building before, money gets into that. So I built out the platform initially myself, using some low code options, really just kind of created it in more of a directory format, just to bring consumers to it, right? So their ability to now see their faces, see who they are, see where they live and where they work and what they focus on within their practices was really just the biggest thing that I wanted to do. So here is a directory where you can find these individuals, right? So it kind of takes away the excuses of, I don't know where to find people of color in this industry. Well, that's not true, because there's not on top of Chip, but there's also other organizations out there that you can find, right? So for me, it was just making sure that you saw our faces. So being able to do that through constructing profiles, constructing this database, reaching out to different individuals within the industry just to hear their stories, right? So that, I've only been in this industry for 15 years. There's people who have been or started in this industry in the 60s and the 70s and the 50s, right? Through all of civil rights. So imagine what their story looked like, literally being the only one in an entire company. And getting to the point of hearing those as I was building and really understanding, wow, this is a lot bigger than what I thought or kind of what I even envisioned in this moment. And this is so much bigger than myself, right? This is something that I think will have, world impact, not just national impact, when you're able to be seen and be heard in a different way that I just didn't feel like was out there. So now when I'm looking at what we're doing within Chip, it's really putting a lot more technology behind it. It's, really amplifying the mission of intentional visibility, which is really what we focus on, and creating different avenues for that to exist.
The kind of the decision to go this route, it probably came from, as you said, there's certain the macro things going on in the country, right? Social unrest, last summer before, just I guess more attention being placed on it, at least from media, and just visible for people, probably more openness for conversations. But you also mentioned earlier, maybe this doesn't have to do with that at different parts, like you kind of felt alone or isolated, right, early in your career. I mean, did that have a big part to play in it? Like, was that something that you were carrying with you, that like was in your mind, like there's a lot of people probably also like me feeling isolated, how do I bridge that too?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So when we're, focusing on the industry in itself, it is isolating. And I did feel that way. There were several times when I was in organizations where it was just, just myself as a woman of color, as a Black woman, and just trying to navigate that, right? Navigating and having conversations when people didn't necessarily understand, or it was looking at me like, how did you get here? Always that question of, what are you doing here? What are you doing in this room? And those kind of microaggressions and things that kind of come with that you have to just deal with, right? And I think it's an unfortunate thing to realize that you just have to deal with it. And then you get to a point where it's just like, you don't, you can start to make different decisions. You can start to dig deeper and empower yourself. You can start to seek out other individuals. So I knew that, I did see other professionals who look like me. And it was more of a sense of, okay, well, how could I intentionally find these individuals, right? What can I actually do, as opposed to just kind of sitting around and just being frustrated with it, right? So is it going to more networking events? Is it going to more conferences? Is it getting involved and trying to figure out what other organizations are out there that are more inclusive? So, in that sense of feeling siloed, I definitely felt that way. I felt that way when I was within a really large firm. And even from a consumer standpoint, I felt like my customers, my clients felt that way. They train you in a way that's different, right? It's kind of go after this client. And even as a consumer, you're not really heard. Because if you tell someone that you want to focus on, black and brown individuals, they kind of look at you like your practice is never going to survive, right? Why would you do that? It's that question that is often probably the most frustrating for a lot of professionals of color. You're telling them that their clients are important. So at the same time, you're telling them that they are important, right? So that was a lot of things that definitely led to my decision to run CHIP. I mean, it's all of those things. It's definitely a combination of it.
Yeah, I'd like on your podcast the other day with Calvin Harris, how you were talking about like building these organizations and these firms for people of color. Like, if not us, then who, right? So like that whole, are you seeing like that trend of people of color building their own firms because of these uninclusive environments?
Absolutely. And I think that's probably what's going to continue to happen over the course of this industry, is that people are definitely, tired and probably frustrated of having to constantly explain themselves and having to show up in a certain way or not be themselves, because they're worried about all sorts of things, right? They're worried about how they're going to grow their practice, how someone looks at them, how they're being judged, and all these other stereotypes that are still embedded in this in parts of the financial industry. So it's great that we're having a lot of conversations around, D&I work and everything that comes with that. But it's also time that we really start putting action towards that, because people are becoming champions for themselves. And that's really what we want to see happen, right? It's not a time where you have to kind of work at this bank or this larger firm. You now have other opportunities to start your own business or your own practice and just kind of pour your own blood, sweat, and tears into that. But I do feel like we need to exist everywhere. So not all of us, everyone in this industry wants to be independent. We want to feel included at these larger firms as well. So I think it's important for those inclusive environments to really start to take shape, so that people know that, hey, the industry is really working together to ensure that you do feel seen, you feel heard, and also your consumer or your clients feel welcome, right? They don't want to bring their clients into a place where, well, if you don't welcome me, you definitely aren't going to welcome my clientele.
Yeah, I guess the question that it's something that's I kind of talked about for myself in a small group setting earlier this year was, I've started to think less about trying to find like a community that I personally feel like I fit into, and more about how do I help foster communities around myself, like, to some sense, right? Like, how do I bring myself to that and elevate those around versus trying to find a place I fit in. I guess kind of listening to you, I hear a little bit of that from you, that you decided, kind of maybe the community that you were hoping for wasn't exactly there as you would have wished. I mean, have you found a community of kind of like people that you do, have you found that in this profession, or have you always felt that was like there's still some lacking for whatever you're looking for out there?
No, I think I've definitely found community, and that community doesn't always look like me, right? I think there's a lot of amazing individuals who are part of my network that I continue to meet on a daily basis, who are just champions for myself as a professional, champion for what we're doing at CHIP. And I think, the more vocal you are about what you're doing and the problems that you're trying to solve, people want to help, whether they look like you or not. So it's not only just kind of focusing on individuals of color, but it's really pulling everyone into this deeper conversation and action plan about how do we create inclusive communities, right? How do we make sure that we're asking people who are at the table what they think, right? Are we making time to kind of do those things, and not just to listen, not just to just hear them talk, but also just to listen. And I feel like a lot of people are providing space providing spaces, and they're listening, and we're having these conversations, and they're understanding, and they want to be proactive, and they're being proactive and reaching out, and how can I help, and what can I do. And I think that's exactly what you want, right? That's how you begin to build this community that starts to sit outside of yourself. So although at CHIP we are focused on wanting to amplify and encourage and really support professionals of color, we also want everyone to be a part of that, because it doesn't really exist if we're still in a small scale focusing on the silo. The industry itself changes and the world changes when we're literally all in this together, right? It all sounds kind of corny and we all can, constantly say representation matters and all of those things, but they're true. And I mean, you can't really say them enough, right? So in order to build these foundations, we have to sit at the same table, no matter what you look like, no matter what your background is, your gender is, we all have to be included in the conversation and just invited to it, right? However you get there, and, doesn't really matter, but the point is that you're there. And just by being there is that you taking that first step to understand. And I think for the most part, that's where people want you to be. And then we can start kind of the journey together as far as what it looks like as we move forward.
Oh yeah, I love that. Like that all of us in it together. I recently wrote an article on the difference between like mentorship and sponsorship. And I don't know if you know Jack Campbell, but I interviewed her for it. And she talked a lot about the sponsors who brought her, in and helped her study for her exams, and introduced her to those high net worth clients and things like that. But it doesn't matter how you got there and you made something of it. But I'm seeing this really positive trend toward this working together and this doing something about it, that I'm really starting to, it makes me feel more hopeful. Like last summer in 2020, summer 2020 felt real, very, very sad and heavy. But I think like now we're starting to see this trend toward real progress, which is really exciting. And your part, I mean, you just won a DEI award from Investment News. So you're the See It Be It award, right?
Yeah, which I'm still, and I mean, you can't see it over my hair, but the award it's back there. And I look at it all the time, and I look at the print in the magazine, and I don't think it's really sunk in. It's interesting too, because when you're a founder, you always just kind of have your head down and you're working, and it's just like, oh, this is amazing, and it's like, okay, well, what can I do? What more can I do? And sometimes you feel like you're not doing enough, which is also crazy, right? It's like you win, you get an award, as amazing as that is, and you feel like you're still not, doing enough. And I just think that just kind of comes with being a founder and having really large visions for what you want to do and the change and the impact you want to make. But being at that awards event in the city, and I'm really grateful and honored for Investment News to pick me for this. But I just felt a sense of encouragement and a sense of just upliftment and just like inspiration around all the people that were in the room from different firms. And I think that was the underlying message that we all really took away, is the fact that we know that we're in this together, right? It's not any one firm or any one company that's going to try to do the work by themselves or not do the work by themselves, right? The only way to make that change is if we're all working together and we're sitting at the same side. And it's not about worrying about, retention or someone stealing your your advisors or things like that. If you're doing the work within your company, people don't want to leave, right? I've left and moved firms before, not for this reason, but just for, to grow my practice. But it's not an easy thing. It's not a fun thing to do, to have to repaper your clients and do all this stuff to do that, right? So when people make the choice to leave, there's sometimes a lot of other things that maybe go along with that. And, we don't want that to be a reason. Like, you're leaving because you didn't feel included, you didn't feel seen. I'd rather have or hear about someone leaving because maybe the tech wasn't right, or it's something like that, right? So, getting down to the things that you can control is really, really important. And I think that's something that you can control, right? And it was good to be in the room and know that there's a lot of firms and a lot of companies that are talking to each other and they're listening to each other, and they're trying to make plans and work together to do that.
Well, congrats on the award too. I mean, that's amazing. And I know founders and people that are driving, you don't typically take the time to, as you said, to sit back and actually enjoy it, right? You're there, you're excited, then the next, an hour later after you leave the event, you're
right,
back
you're
to
back
everything.
at the emails.
But it looked like an amazing event. I wasn't up there. We had a couple people from Carson over there, and Yeah, it's I'm glad this, the award stuff is always I feel like my emotions and thoughts around awards consistently change, and that I'm glad that people get recognized for the work. I think it's really important. And the one thing I worry about with awards on, I'll just speak personally for our firm, is that I think we were recognized for an award, and Anna, you might remember which one, but I know we had a couple people there, and I always worry that it's kind of like, oh, we got an award, we pat ourselves on the back, and you lose focus on it, right? Because not a lot of people are around, but I had somebody on this show that was doing this work back in the 90s, and she said we won all these awards and we got praised and we're in the journal and talking about how great we are. And she goes, and then I looked back recently, and it's 2020. She said that we had less females in leadership positions than in 1998. And she goes, so we had this great momentum, and then as soon as we kind of got to where it was working, right, all that focus pulled back on it because we just assumed that, hey, it's done. And then she says you look back 20 years later, and it really went back to worse than it was when we started all those initiatives. And it's not that those initiatives made it worse, but if you didn't keep that purposeful focus on it, it can kind of slip back to where things are, because it's very easy to become industry average again if it's not a focus of your firm. And so to me, it's one big thing that, like, I don't know how you change a lot of the hiring, and as you said, like bringing people into the firm, making them feel included, because it still seems like a big gap to me that the people, we still hear that. I mean, was it JP Morgan or whoever that said that, oh, we can't find talent or whatever, and it was just like,
it was like, really, come on, are you serious? I mean, I don't even know where to start from that. I don't think we have enough time on the podcast. But I will let that be, and maybe we'll have a part two to unpack all of that. Yeah, we'll put a pin in that. But no, I mean, to your point, it's, the awards, when companies win them, it's definitely okay to celebrate in that moment, but then you do have to realize, okay, well, what else are we doing? We got this award. What does that actually mean, right? Why did we receive that? It's kind of doing the backup to it, and also making sure that you kind of come back home, and this is not just an award that represents the company. This is one that represents the people. So when you look at it that way, well, what are you doing for the people? How are you showing up for them every day? Because without that, the award is really meaningless, right? If you're not actually doing the work. And companies do win a lot of awards, and you go back home, you're on this really great high. And then, to your point of this woman that you were speaking about, realize that, hey, you look up and there's, where are the women? Where are the people of color? What happened, right? And having to make sure that everything that you're doing goes back to actionable steps in measuring and how you're actually tracking that, and what you're doing from a leadership level and at the C-suite space. What does your executive leadership look like? Because that's a lot of the things that you don't see within this industry, right? If you're looking at firms, or you join a firm and you're young and you're motivated and you're like, okay, well, I love this company, and you're always thinking about what's next. But if you look up and you see no one up there that looks like you're every day, you come in every year, every, month, it just becomes a little bit more diminished, because you're like, well, where does the ceiling end? Because they haven't, over the past, however many years or months I've been here, brought in one person in this area. So I know that I can't stay here, right? And you that just drips on you. And then little things happen, right? And then you're just like, okay, well, I really have to leave. So it's important to make sure that you're doing that work for your people, and you're asking those questions, and you're having those tough conversations, right? But those tough conversations will lead you to really not just win the physical award, but the actual award will be the people that stay connected and start to really grow your firm in a more inclusive manner than you probably ever thought.
And one of the important elements I think about inclusion is that self-awareness, and like even the little things that make people not feel included. A lot of times, leadership or middle management don't know that they're doing. Like I feel very blessed to be where I am at Carson's, a very inclusive space. And you'll have to fire me if I need to leave, Jimmy. So keep that in mind. But like other places where I've been, like I was writing this article on like this invisible discrimination, and just remembering different things. Like, when we used to work this outdoor trade show, I had a full reporter workload while also editing and proofing. But yet I was required to order lunch for everybody and then walk to the restaurant and pick it up and feed the whole newsroom. I'm like, why did I have to do that? Like I'm writing this article and I'm like, I was the only person of color on staff. And it was like, whoa, like that's not cool. So, and it's just like, reading Miranda Hart's tweets and outlining this article, I started revisiting all of those things. And that was just one story. So it's like these things that you're like, oh, I didn't know I was doing that to you. Like I didn't mean it that way. But like just having that introspection, I think is really important, that self-awareness. So just to add on.
Yeah. It's simple things, right? It kind of goes back to those first things when we were kids, right? You would just walk up to someone because maybe they were playing with a Lego that you liked, right? And it was your favorite color. And it's like, oh, wow, this is cool. Can we play together? And it is like we forget all of those things as we grow up because, life happens and things happen to us and we have different experiences that kind of reshape that. But a lot of times it's really just going back to that and finding those common connections, right? So I cycle. And that's something that maybe someone else cycles, right? So here's a commonality that, we can kind of start to talk about and dig deeper into and just ask those questions, right? Like, how was your weekend? How are you doing? Hi. Right? Literally, hi. I was watching the news yesterday and they were talking about the power of a high five, although we're kind of in this COVID environment, so we're not seeing people, but maybe there's virtual high fives. And, now we're really conscious about, being germaphobes, as I was pre-COVID anyway. Right. So either way, it's like these simple things where you just see someone, right? They were talking about what a high five means. And it just means that you see them. I got you. It means all of these things without having to say it. So I think kind of figuring out how we embody that, when we're going back to these stages of remembering that we're humans, we're people, like we want to just be treated as such. And that's anyone, regardless of, what your socioeconomic status, your gender, and your ethnicity, all those things don't matter. I just want to come to your table and play with your Lego because it's my favorite color, right? Let's go back and kind of put that into the mind frame of how we work a lot of our differences. Although it's not that simple, but we still have a lot of work to do, but I think trying to reshape the conversation around that might be helpful for some people.
Yeah. And in COVID, we do the elbows, the high elbows.
Yeah, exactly. The high elbows or whatever it is, right? Next year, I don't know what it'll be. Who knows?
Maybe somebody will create a new device to do high fives, right? We'll have fake hands that we high five with in the future instead, right?
Right, yeah. Right. And let's not take it too far. Then people will be throwing virtual hands at people. We don't want that. That's not what we mean.
Yeah, and I mean, you brought up two things in there I think are important too. I mean, kind of the end part, right? You said that's oversimplifying it to some degree, and that the conversations are hard. And I think one thing that I've learned a lot over the past 2 years or so is that these conversations are hard, and they're not all gonna go like as smoothly as you might have hoped. And that doesn't mean that they're not going to be net positive, but that sometimes you're going to have a hard conversation and the words that you use might not be perfect and they might not come across exactly as you mean them. But it's, you kind of can't be truly just afraid of, making mistakes if you're going to have these conversations, because, when I talk to people, not everyone views everything the same, right? I can go talk to different advisors and, Black, brown advisors, and they have different experiences and different views of how they want to be treated also, right? And even terminology that's used, right? It's different what people want. And so some of that it's not easy at all. And, I've been in some of those conversations recently where I was like, you could have had that exact same conversation elsewhere. It would have gone really well, didn't go well in this context. And I think as long as you're willing to have those and kind of be open, I think it's very good. And I think a lot of people are still afraid to have those conversations, which holds some of it back, right? That this fear of saying or doing the wrong thing holds some people back from engaging in it. And, I guess as much as I can say, try it, as best you can and, learn from it, because you learn. And, one of the things that, Anna, you brought up too, is kind of these micro pieces that occur, microaggressions and just behavior and treating people, right, just seeing people. And somebody brought this up to me, like, do I call my female colleagues is like spontaneously as I would call my male colleagues? And I did sit back and think about it, and I was like, I really don't. Like, now some people I do, like there are some women that I work with. Anna knows, like she'll randomly, I warned her before she joined, you're going to get random texts from me on like Sunday and stuff. But across the team, I did realize it wasn't like even, right? That I don't call everybody the same amount. And so I've been trying to just be more cognizant of that. And that's to me, like it's micro, but it also matters because it's not giving somebody the same airtime as somebody else. And I get that there are reasons why maybe some of the males, like, I felt more comfortable just calling them randomly, but, I've tried to, make sure that I am cognizant of that and not, giving some people more time to chat with me and listen to their ideas than others. But it did take somebody bringing that up to me before. And that's not the scheduled stuff, right? It was the unscheduled, the spontaneous stuff, but it wasn't even and fair across the board by any means. And I did need somebody to bring that up to me to change it.
Yeah, and sometimes you do need that, right? Kind of you need that self-check because, yeah, there's a lot of things that people don't realize that they do, and it's just because they've done it so much. And it doesn't always come from a negative place, right? So we also have to be mindful of the things that we're willing or we're able to receive, right? And knowing who you're talking to and being able to recognize that, I think is just half the battle. It's just when you don't recognize that and when you don't want to change and you're kind of fighting that, then that's where the problems come in, right? But it's just like, oh, hey, I didn't even realize I'm doing that. I apologize. And then you work and put in the work to do better, right? People, it's so much easier to not put in the work. It's so much easier to just do what you've normally done because now you have to pull an extra couple muscles out to start to remember, oh, wait, hey, okay, I'm about to do this thing. Let me either reward it, let me just not do it, let me be mindful of, this person's time or, whatever the case may be. And you just take a couple seconds to really think about it and put yourself in that person's shoes. And that's a lot of where people get stuck, right? They're not really thinking of others or really leading with any kind of empathy or just thought, right? It's just like, okay, well, I'll just blurt out and do whatever. And then I'll worry about not even worrying about it later. It'll just kind of be what it is. And that's just how I've done things. And that's just not the mentality that you can continue to have, especially, ever in life, but ever in this environment that we're in right now, right? You really need to be mindful of different cultures, right? So not all Black people want to be referred to as African Americans. Some prefer Black Americans within different cultures, right? Not everyone is Latinx, it's Hispanic, right? It's all these different types of cultures that you kind of need to ask, right? And ask someone, okay, well, how would you like to be referred, as opposed to assuming that they can just answer or speak on behalf of, all the people in their culture, which is typically the thing that happens for Black and brown individuals, right? That's how we sometimes end up in a lot of these, D&I roles, is because you raised your hand to speak up and now someone has, decided that you are the person to speak for the culture. And it's just, that's not the case.
Yeah. You brought up the one thing, which is just ask. There was some tweets about this from the Riskalyze conference, and I still haven't figured out, like, I would like to do something around, I don't know if it's going to be a webinar or podcast or something at Excel, but I saw a handful of women were kind of tweeting that, just for the women there, that they were being asked a lot, oh, like, whose spouse are you? And kind of an assumption that they were not the advisors. And, some of them fairly well-known advisors too, that, like, I kind of assumed that, like, people would have recognized them anyway. And, but it, like, the basic thing of just asking a more neutral question of like, oh, hey, what brought you here? Right. Versus, leading with an assumption that because it was a woman, that it was a spouse of an advisor there. And I do think that's an important, and that obviously goes to lots of areas, right? Same thing, like having Anna pick out lunch menus or whatever, right? As the editor in chief, like, not really an appropriate thing, like, ask those things. And, but I wonder, like, there's obviously in our space a very good conversation about that, like just asking less kind of biased questions, right? That, like, how would you ask that to somebody else? And, I heard that on a recruiting call recently. It was a woman advisor of color, and a question was asked to her, and I just remember sitting there thinking, like, I don't think anyone would have asked that question to a male advisor ever, right? Like, you never would have asked that as part of a recruiting thing. And not in like a good way, right? Like a question where I was like, I don't think that was a good question to be asked to somebody. And like, but you could have gotten to that answer with a much more neutral question versus what occurred.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, on the receiving end of that, then you shut down. You realize that, okay, well, this is the tone of the environment that you're getting ready to step into. And, that probably more than likely possibly ended it for that person, unless someone came in and kind of saved the day and course corrected. But that's a lot of times is what happens, right? You just kind of get pigeonholed into what people think you're supposed to be, or the reasons why they think that you're supposed to be there, right? So for all the women who are there as advisors, probably some of them even there to speak, right? And someone's asking you, hey, where's your spouse? Is he speaking? Or, and it's just, you just get turned off completely. I always think of the story that Melody Hobson always tells about her being, I forgot what event that she was at, where someone had asked her if she was the waitstaff or had handed her something. And it's just, it's always that perception and that stereotype again, right? Just because you are a person of color. And I've had that happen to me where people think that you work at the place that you're actually there to attend or possibly speak at. And it's in those moments where there's that reminder of just the frustration. And I mean, so many emotions just kind of come out of that, where how you've gotten this far, and then yet and still, even as you're about to possibly take the stage, here's a reminder of who you really are, right? Here's a reminder that you're Black, or that you're a woman, or that you're this, right? And it's just not something that you want to experience, that a lot of other people just don't experience or don't even think about.
That hope versus that reality that we were talking about, Calvin.
Yeah, that hope versus the reality. It's, absolutely.
But the reality is you're super amazing. You do a ton of things. You're getting your MBA right now. And for my own selfish knowledge, how do you manage it all? How do you do it?
I don't know, because my Frenchie is not helping. So I have an intern, but he literally just naps all day. He does nothing. I mean, he's got stuff over here to do. And I'm just like, dude, what's your problem?
I have a couple of lazy interns myself.
Yeah, I don't know, but no, it gets done, and I think pursuing my MBA was always something that I wanted to do. I just think that in the moments I was doing it because I thought I was supposed to, right? That was like the next step in life. But for me, kind of backing out of that and realizing that, you chart your own path, things work out the way that they're supposed to in life when you're pursuing your passion. And as crazy as it is to start a company and then also do your executive MBA, I don't think there was any better timing for it. I mean, there's a lot of other parameters that kind of got me here as well. That's for another podcast. But, I think that it was important for me, and everything that I'm able to pour into what I'm learning, I'm putting back into my business. So it's a great thing for me. Not that every founder needs to do it, but I also kind of would recommend it in an interesting way as well, especially if you didn't have the business background. I mean, I came from a business background. I actually have a degree in marketing, and then fell into financial services. But I also think that's where I get to flex that creative muscle and spirit of mine.
Did you keep your advisory practice too when you set up Chip?
I did in the beginning. So I had it listed as my OBA, especially when we were set up and we weren't at a point where we had turned on any kind of revenue model, which we just recently did. So it was, fine to kind of keep that going. And then I always knew that I was kind of crawling my way out of advisory work. It was something that I loved, but I was also starting to lose passion for that work. And my passion was being pulled into this space. So I just, started to lean more into that. And I think that when you do let yourself lean into those things, amazing things happen, including this award behind me that I'm so thrilled and excited about. But yeah, I mean, you just have to sometimes follow that. And, it was definitely tough to walk away from my practice. A lot of my clients I had been with for quite some time or had started with me when I first went independent. But I also feel like, you know, when your heart's not in that particular area of the business, you really don't need to be doing it because it's a lot of work to build up that business. So for me, it was a great move to step away, and I'm still in the industry, just more on the fintech side.
Yeah, you've got to follow where your heart is on those things. People ask me all the time, like, Jamie, why don't you be an advisor? And I'm like, I have zero desire to set annual meetings with people for the next 25 years. And if I don't get excited by that, I should not do it.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Like that was not exciting to me. At one point it was, right? Like that was my dream of having my own RA and doing all of those things. And, you know, things change. And I just looked up and I was like, that's not what you want to do. It's really not. And it's okay, right? It's okay for that to not be your thing. And I think from a founder perspective, people get so tied up into what they thought they were supposed to be doing that they just hold on tight and don't let it go. And then when other opportunities pop up, they're very reluctant to kind of even open the window to it, right? It's like, no, I don't even want to see it. So they put the shade down. But it's like, no, at least just open it and look at it and see what it looks like over there.
Well, we're down here to the end of the podcast, and I do feel like we only scratched the surface on this one. Sometimes I get to the end, and I'm glad that the podcast is over, right? And I've exhausted my ability to ask the person questions today. Today, I felt very much like we've left some things, undiscovered yet. So this is it's one of the I'll be honest, it's one of the few podcasts I've done now where I really feel like we need to do another one, because I feel like you've got a lot of really good stories and that's on me, right? I didn't ask the right questions here today to get
Hey, it's all good. Well, you know where to find me. And if you have cookies present, and if you I'll just throw this out there. If you want to send me cookies from Lauren, was it Lauren, right?
Yep. I will. Yeah.
I'm
going to
always
commit
here.
to that on here.
You heard it, everyone. It's on the podcast. That means I should be receiving cookies specifically by Lauren. And I will send her a message on Instagram just to.
Yep.
I'm always happy to come
make
back.
It official. Last two closing questions. One's the easier one, where you found, like, where people follow you, interact with you, website, and then the other one is, I'll make it shorter this time. But what's a word that you would like for people to associate with you when they think about you? Usually we talk about, like, if your legacy, but is there a word that when people say, "Hey, Dana Wilson," they think about X, Y, or Z?
Ooh, that's a good one. So what's interesting is I think the word that I've been running with is disrupt, and not disrupt in a like, oh my God, let's just knock over my microphone and start tearing up stuff. But disrupt in an innovative way. I think that this industry is coined for some good disruption, in the way that brings other voices to the table. And I think that is probably the best word. For me, when I had my first media piece come out in Forbes, that was the title that came out, and I didn't know the title before it was coming up, and it was just like, Dana Wilson disrupting the financial industry, and I was just like, wow, that's it. So literally, if you're looking for me, you find me at Dana Disrupts on Instagram, on Twitter. You can follow us at Chip_pros at Twitter, or Chip Professionals on Instagram and Facebook.
Awesome. Well, Anna, Dana, thanks so much for being on here today. This was awesome. I learned a ton, and I'm excited to have our next conversation. I'm going to make sure you get those cookies right after this so I don't forget. But,
Thank you. I appreciate it. And thanks absolutely for having me. Super excited to come back at some point.